Welcome to the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Greene, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change.
Steve, we've had a whole week together here in Moss.
In Moss.
Yeah.
Your ancestral home.
My ancestral home, as it turns out. Anyway.
Well, anyway, there's always been a lot of, how do you say it? Or at least my mind has worked a lot around the science. Or what's going on in the nervous system? What part of the nervous system is doing what? Where is this tremor coming from?
Sure.
How does it work in the body?
Sure.
Why is it working in the body?
Right.
And we're always looking at those things.
Yeah.
But we seldom take a step back and look at the art of it in terms of how the facilitator can support in various ways.
Right.
We talk about it, but we have never set it in any kind of system before.
Yeah.
And we haven't asked very many questions around it. Why would you choose to do this intervention in front of that intervention?
Sure.
What's the basis of choosing the different ones? Is it intuition? Is it what you see? Is it a gut feeling? Is it all of it?
Sure.
All of these things to kind of get a better look at that and a deeper look at it and see if we might be able to develop that more and get a vocabulary around it, a language around it that works for the business of tremoring, or the technique of tremoring.
Yeah.
That I find was very interesting to kind of think around those things.
Yeah, and maybe that's even here, and maybe even in this conversation, maybe that's something that we hear from each other even a little bit more. What guides us? You so oftenly in groups. For me, very often groups, but also individuals. So that might be interesting just to share even more in this conversation, possibly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then also starting on the philosophy.
Right.
That was like, what's our philosophy?
Right.
There's a lot of interesting thoughts and viewpoints and just it opens up a whole new area of thought.
Yeah. Well, the why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you're getting to the deeper causes behind NIT and why we are wanting to do this.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a fascinating big subject that we just kind of opened up.
Yeah, I feel like we had a week, but we could have a month.
Easily.
We wouldn't be at the end of what we're.
Yeah.
That's why I said, all right, okay, May or June, I gotta find a way to be in Europe for a little while. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what captivated each of us about neurogenic tremoring, kind of what, and so maybe we'll start with you if it's okay. I know you've been working with neurogenic integration with David when he came and introducing it to chiropractors here in Norway well over 15 years ago, something like that.
I think it was 2008.
So what's that? 16 years ago? Something
like that.
But maybe you could share, because I haven't totally heard the story. When you first saw the technique, or tremoring through David, like what stood out to you? What how you conceptualized it? Did you connect it to things you had seen as a chiropractor or through other work? If you can remember, kind of what hooked you or grabbed you.
I remember it actually quite clearly because it was so. I loved it instantly. In chiropractic, there are very many different techniques, and most of them are associated with a directed physical force into the joint to help it restore its full range of motion.
Yeah.
And also, of course, to affect the nerves and the muscles and everything around it. But kind of the heart of chiropractic, originally at least, was working with the nervous system.
Uh-huh.
And this was a conference where I was then on the board of the Norwegian Chiropractic Association and responsible for the continuing education for Norwegian chiropractors at the time.
Right, right.
And we invited David Busselli to come and have a lecture because the theme of that particular conference was the autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
And I didn't know him. He was recommended to me by someone else. And seeing that he was working with the autonomic nervous system, it just kind of fit.
Fit
Why
the topic,
not introduce chiropractors to a modality that works so directly with the autonomic nervous system as this?
Right, right, right.
So we invited him, and I remember being in the audience. It was so interesting, and he was going through the different body positions and movements to initiate the tremors. And he had us all on the floor, tremoring within a few minutes.
Was there enough space for that?
And it was crowded.
Yeah.
It was crowded.
You were just in sort of a conference, the tables aside kind of a thing?
No tables. We were rows of chairs, and we somehow managed to
make enough space.
Yeah.
Wow.
We fit everybody on the floor.
Yeah.
And that feeling, when the tremoring was moving through my body, reminded me. So first of all, I just knew that this was just right.
Right.
There wasn't any intellectual attachment or like explanation going on in my head about what was going on. I just felt in my body that, oh my God, this is just right. But from a chiropractic point of view, like technique point of view, I've had some experience in a technique called network spinal analysis, and it causes what I will now name a neurogenic movement through the body. That is, the body moves. It's not tremoring, but it's movement.
Spontaneous movement, not movement that you decided to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you work with very light touch and breath and body position there also. Right. And it causes this movement. And then after a while, actually connects to your breath. It's quite beautiful and quite deep. You connect to your own body, you connect to your breath, you can connect to your emotions, you can work very deep with that technique. So for me, this was such a parallel that here you got the neurogenic movement. I mean, if I want to talk about it from an intellectual point of view, it's like you get the neurogenic movement, but you also got the tremoring, and they were like moving, you move back and forth between these two. And some of them, they are right on top of each other, and it's beautiful. I love it. It's like the body looking for new solutions, the nervous system trying to find a new way to do something. Right. It also, of course, release tension and
energy. And
whatever is going on in your body at the time. And also that the beautiful thing, there is nothing, you can't make a mistake.
Right.
You can't do anything wrong. It's the body doing this for you. Right. And I just love that, to be able to allow nature to do something right for you. Because we're always so busy trying to fix things. Right. And often we push ourselves out of the body's natural way of wanting to do it because we just don't have time.
Right.
We're so busy all the time.
Yeah.
So I loved it instantly.
Did you find anything as you practiced it? Was there anything personally useful for you in terms of just the, that way of invoking the neurogenic tremor process or neurogenic movement, and that sort of a spontaneous, was it meaningful for your own personal work?
Yes, absolutely. On many levels, actually. Just the simple fact that the tremor, to use it after exercise. I love to lift weights, and I was lifting a lot before, and I loved, what do you call it, squats?
Yeah.
Oh, and I mean, it was like, the next day, 2 days later, you're standing on top of the stairs and you're wondering how you're going to
How
get
are you
down.
going to get to the bottom of the stairs? Yeah, yeah.
So, but I figured out that if I tremored after I'd had a hard workout,
Yep.
no problem. The
Okay.
acid just kind of flushed out.
Less
It
of the
was-
lactic acid.
Oh,
and all that, yeah.
it was, I could do like 90 squats and it was okay. Really.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it was quite amazing. But I realized I had to get a really good tremor going. I can't just kind of...
A superficial,
No.
superficial
It
tremor.
had to really
Yeah.
like catch, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean. And I had to really spend at least 10 minutes or more.
Yep.
Otherwise, it didn't have that much of an effect.
The influence, yeah.
But just working on releasing emotional traumas, it's been quite powerful.
Yeah.
It's been good. Doing that in groups, having support, and being in a setting where you dare to go deep, where you can just drop into it.
Yeah.
And you know that somebody's holding space for you so that you can let it go without any fear. So
Yeah.
It's been interesting, powerful, useful, everything. And also as a way to get into a really quiet state.
Yeah.
Just let the tremors just kind of flow through your body. And then you kind of empty your mind very naturally, without trying. It just happens. And that I love.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Yeah. It's gentle.
Yeah. In your in your chiropractic work, I guess you had the training as the network spinal analysis, so you had one framework for understanding spontaneous movement or neurogenic, what we might call neurogenic movement. Either within network framework, or even just more general chiropractic framework, does tremoring show up? Is there language for that? How did you, before Dr. Berselli kind of gave his understanding of the neurobiology of it, did you have sort of a frame of reference from your chiropractic work about what is this tremor response or neurogenic movement? How did you conceptualize it as a chiropractor?
I hadn't really thought of it before in those terms. No. So that was kind of...
So it felt new in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was also a thing that I loved about it, was that I didn't have to be the therapist.
Right.
This was very empowering for the person, because this is something they can do themselves.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I could tell them do this. And also I would have them tremor before treatment.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was also, or is also very useful.
Yeah.
Because the person gets to relax a little bit on the table.
Nice.
And really relax.
Yeah.
We often see so many people. I come into the treatment room and the person is sitting there on the phone,
Well, weren't you saying that even now at your clinic, because you're often treating multiple patients at the same time, but in different treatment areas?
No, I don't treat multiple people at the same time.
Not at the same time, but there might be several people there.
I walk between rooms, so I'm treating in one room, and then somebody will enter the other room.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And
but then,
then
so
they
isn't
tremor.
part of your that? So if I'm not here with you,
Then tremor.
Spend some, if they already know how to tremor, they can spend some, as maybe before they come into their adjustment, or after the adjustment, even perhaps.
Totally.
Yeah,
It gives you, by working like that, it gives the person time to kind of settle down, find a little quiet, and hopefully they do that. We encourage that, and not sit and surf on their phone.
Yeah.
But so it's
Cool.
I like it. I can sometimes hear the table. It makes a clicking sound or something when somebody is tremoring, and I'm like, yes, they're doing it.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Cool. maybe I'll share a little bit in my own
Yeah, do please.
sort of similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, the story that I always like to tell, and I shared this with you and Jason the other night, was that the first time I had a tremoring experience was out of the blue when I was going through something similar to the Rolfing 10 series of structural integration bodywork, which is a very, kind of deep tissue, a bit it's more than massage. It's a bit uncomfortable, certain parts of it.
Intense.
And I was living in Hawaii at the time, and the bodywork therapist was taking me through this, and it was maybe midway through these 10 series. And then one day when I was on my back, my legs just out of nowhere started going tremoring, and my hips started moving, and I looked at her, eyes wide open, and I was like, is this okay? And she said, yeah, it's a release. Go for it. No problem. And she just really just kept working. She was working in my rib cage. And I mean, I probably could have stopped it if I really needed to, but it had a lot of intensity to it. So it almost.
So she was working on you while you were. She just kept
She
working
just
on
kept
you while
doing
you
whatever
were
she
tremoring.
was working on,
Wow.
and I was on my back on the bodywork table, and my knees were up the way we are in tremoring now. And so it just was going, and she kept doing her thing. And there wasn't a lot of emotion to it that I remember, but it was like just energy moving through my body, a lot of heat. The vibration itself was, had a lot of, just a lot of energy to it, so to speak. And maybe it lasted 10 minutes, I'm not sure, but it was so surprising to me. And I'm like a bit like scientifically minded. So, I'm maybe 22 at the time, something like that. And so I was like, well, so what was that? I was like, was I possessed by a spirit? Like how, what?
You were depossessed.
Right. What do we have to say about this? And she really said, oh, it's a release. It's normal. But it was really mysterious to me. And I felt differently afterwards. I felt looser and like some tension in my pelvis. And the reason I was getting all this body work anyway was because of a hip problem. And that was, and that was sort of the beginning of, something really changing in my hip. So that was very helpful. Wow. It wasn't like it all healed right then and there, but it was, I think, a part of the unraveling of whatever the tension pattern was that was sustaining all of that. But anyway, it never happened again. But then about 10 years later, and I had gotten so much benefit from that body work in general. And it was the same time I was doing the Zen training and martial arts training. Later on, I got really curious about body work. And so at some point I trained in it. And then at some point that, became my work, instructional integration body work. And when I was doing that, I would sometimes see the same thing happen. Where somebody, and partly in our system of body work, if somebody's on their back, their knees are bent. That's just the default position that we use.
Exactly.
And I think that it makes it more likely that we start to get the spontaneous movement that we see in tremoring and neurogenic integration. So I would sometimes see, and sometimes I would see just the beginning of it, and sometimes it would be a really big experience like it happened to me. And so I got used to it in a sense. I still didn't know much about it. My training didn't talk about it. It just was like, it was very vague.
It's really cool that you had the experience yourself first.
Definitely.
Because then you didn't have to worry about it when it happened to
That's right.
people.
Yeah, I didn't have to be surprised by it, right? Or no, right.
And feel like, oh my God, what's going on with this person? You know that it was safe.
Right, or at least I assumed it was safe.
Yeah.
I hoped it was safe. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I still felt like there was. I still had a lot of questions about it.
Yeah.
For you regular listeners to the podcast, you know that about half of these episodes focus on TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises. And I wanted to make sure that you know about the Redbeard TRE certification program, our educational platform to certify others. And we have both an online version of that I teach, as well as an in-person version of the training that my colleague Ellen McKenzie teaches in Madison, Wisconsin.
My next online certification training is beginning August 3rd and 4th, 2024. That's the first of 3 modules. And the way the certification program works is it's about a 10 to 12 month program divided into 3 phases of learning, each with a weekend connected to it, and then some one-on-one work with me and people on my team to support your learning journey. TRE has been a life-changing modality for myself. It's open to people with any background. I wanted to make sure you know about the program. You can find more information at redbeardtre.com. But anyway, I was around this time, this is around 2013, I think, and I was trading work regularly with a acupuncturist. One week, she would give me an acupuncture treatment. The following week I would do structural integration body work. And when she was doing her treatments on me, she kept talking about how, she's into this TRE thing and she's going through some training and I should really learn about it. It's about the psoas, and our style of structural integration bodywork does a lot of work with the psoas. So she kept talking about this, but the joke I always make is I was totally saturated by acronyms because I had studied myofascial release, MFR, and zero balancing, ZB, and craniosacral therapy, CST, and structural integration, SI, and everything in the bodywork world, maybe chiropractic. It's definitely true in the therapy world as well. EMDR, SC, there's all these acronyms. And so the joke I had is I just didn't even listen to her because it's like, okay, all right, TRE,
You can't have another acronym.
I do not need another acronym in my life. I don't care what it is. I have had enough training. I'm good. So I didn't listen to her and I just tuned her out. And she didn't, for some reason though, maybe I tuned her out, but I don't think she told me it was about tremoring because I think I would have listened if she had. But anyway, so she needed to get certified. So she asked if I would be her demo person while somebody observed her. And I said, sure, knowing nothing about what it was. And so we actually did it at my apartment and set up a laptop, and it was using Skype or something like that. And then she guided me through the process of neurogenic tremoring in Dave's original format, TRE, going through all the sort of exercises and then laying on the floor and stimulating the tremor response. And I was so freaking excited because it just completely duplicated the thing that had happened to me.
Oh, cool.
So I was like, oh my God, yes. This is
finally.
By now, this is probably 12, 13 years after the original time. And so, I almost couldn't wait to be done with the session because all I wanted to do was order the books, read the website. Because I was like, not only does somebody know what this is, there's a whole technique around it. There's a way to make it happen on its own, deliberately. There's therapeutic value. And so I just ordered the books and I took the training and I just soaked everything in because for me, it was answering a question that I had, which is, what is that? What had happened to me? Why do I see that in others? Is there anything important about it? And then it was a big yes when I got to learn more. So that was kind of my own sort of entry into it. And for me, it was really exciting. To me, I loved it as a personal practice. I think that something that we talk a lot about in structural integration work is letting go. And so, but it's a different sort of letting go. It's, there's deep pressure, you're using your breath, you're sort of learning to be with strong sensation, but rather than resist muscularly, learning how to soften and release. So that's sort of this idea around release and letting go was like a big part of our kind of philosophy of the structural integration work. And to me, tremoring was like a different kind of letting go, where to me, what I really learned in it was to sort of sense some signals in my body, allow them to emerge in the neurogenic tremor reflex, but then where can this take me? And why do I have so much movement in my hips and my legs, but I don't have something happen? I look at the person next to me and they're looking very fluid, and it's not about, now I know it's not about comparison or tremor envy, as we say.
Oh, there is that.
Right?
That's a concept.
but even so, you start to ask questions about. I think you can start to feel where you are flowing with, where you're able to flow, and where there's a sense of rigidity. Yeah. Exactly. And so to me, it was very revealing of how I carried and carry rigidity. Yeah. And then gave a way to explore it. And I liked how the exploring of it was not just through, what I was used to before that was through, okay, somebody comes in with their elbow or their knuckle and they put direct pressure into the area of stiffness, and then there's a lot of pain or often with it, and then you're releasing, letting go, and that works to some extent for sure. I still work that way in some cases, but this was different. It was using movement and as its pathway, and so to me, there's so many benefits. And I'm the kind of person who, at that time, like if I'm going to dive into something, I do a total deep dive. So I don't know. There were times I was probably tremoring 4 or 5 hours a day, especially like I remember during my initial training with Dr. Briselli, I would get up I was staying at a hotel. I would get up in the morning and I'd tremor maybe about an hour before class.
Wow.
Go to class and we would do a tremor session, maybe 30 minutes.
That's amazing.
At lunchtime, I go to my room and I do at least 20 minutes. Come back, do the session, and then at night I would do more because I just was like, I want to get the most out of it. And I don't, for some people that would definitely, that'd be too much.
Too much, yeah.
Luckily for me, I don't think, not only was it not too much, I think I actually sort of benefited from that. Yeah. Like that helped kind of get through certain things.
Yeah, I mean, then you kind of have ample opportunity to push through resistance.
Yeah. But then I think the last piece I would say about that era was that I just became super interested in, could this be useful and applied to my clients? Because I had a lot of clients doing mostly structural integration bodywork, but also myofascial release, and a little bit similar to network spinal analysis in myofascial release, similar to craniosacral therapy. These are lighter touch modalities that often see what you and I would call neurogenic movement, or in those systems often called unwinding or myofascial unwinding, sort of less tremory, but more sort of spontaneous movements into rotation or extension. So I was familiar with that, and so I thought, and I was working with a lot of clients, and I thought, what's interesting about tremoring is, one, it's sort of super, it turns on the nervous system, something in the nervous system. And so it gives new possibilities in a treatment session. Yeah. Also, it's like a skill that somebody can learn. They can do it on their own. And I kind of had this sort of like a hypothesis. And the hypothesis was, if I tell everybody to start doing this, I show them how, right there on the table. And then I tell them, hey, do this a couple times a week. Would I notice the difference between the people who were doing it and the people who were not, in terms of, in the hands-on body work? Yeah. And so a few months went by, and I was completely convinced. I was like, the people who were tremoring regularly, their breath would support what they were doing. They would let go so much more easily. I didn't have to work as hard. Yeah. They were more sensitive, so less pressure from me was more meaningful and useful for them. They were more likely to, if somebody, not that this is always needed in body work, but if there was going to be, if part of their goal was around emotional processing or resolution of trauma or grief or something like that, they were more easily able to access it, in the treatment session. And so I was like, this is a complete game changer for me as a body worker. Yeah. And then it almost became to the point where, I had some exceptions to this rule, but basically I didn't really want to work with you if you weren't doing some of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was supporting the
whole process.
Yeah. And what I would always say, and at the time the motto of my business was waking up the body and the nervous system I forget exactly, like from the inside out or something. And that was the way I saw it. I saw it as tremoring is something that somebody is doing from the inside. They're accessing this neurogenic tremor reflex. And that I, as a facilitator or a bodywork therapist, was engaging sort of from the outside in through touch, typically, and that by having both directions, there's sort of something happening instead of just a sort of a passive model.
Exactly.
Oh, treat me, fix me.
Yeah.
But if they were sort of
Give some
something was coming
responsibility.
from the inside out, and we were meeting, I found that this was a more rich intersection. So
Yeah.
this is sort of what really excited. That's how I sort of started to meet David personally, because I got so excited about how body workers should know about this, because it just can change your entire practice. And so I wrote to him and I shared my thoughts, and he said, yes, 100%. He has a body work background too, as you know. And so he said, yeah, definitely, keep notes, write about it. Later I had chances to, present about it at some of our advanced things and this and that. And in some ways it was that interest of bringing it to body workers that led down the road eventually to him suggesting that you and I connect. This was maybe about 18 months ago now, because he said, well, because he and I had been working on a project before the pandemic, but that the pandemic interrupted, and then he kind of wants to retire mostly.
Yeah.
And so I said, we really got to sort of shape this up a little bit more. And he said, yes, definitely, but you have to meet Siv. She's a chiropractor in Norway, and she's thinking along very similar lines about creative ways to bring neurogenic tremoring out there and also into the professional domain, like through body work or other things. And so that was, that's really, in some ways, that thread is what brought us together, at least from my side of it.
Yeah, because what you're saying about noticing a difference in patients, I notice a huge difference. Sometimes it's fascinating, because if I've been treating a person, and then there's a lot of things here that can be helped with TRE. You feel it in the body and the tissue.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, I will learn it. So they go and learn it. We'll come to a class. And then sometimes I have the privilege of treating them maybe the day after they've been. And it's like touching a different person.
Yeah.
It is amazing. And they are always surprised. Because like, oh my God, I can push or palpate, feel into the tissues where usually there was a lot of pain, and then there's a lot less.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful, and to feel joints starting to move that has not moved before, so they get a very concrete, direct feedback that it's, yes, they are feeling better, but they get it kind of emphasized when they come in, and I'm checking all the spots that used to be terrible,
Tender or stuck.
Yeah.
Stiff, yeah.
And then there is a huge change. And that's always so satisfactory.
I think that's what keeps us
Yeah,
going
yeah.
as
You
manual
know.
therapists.
Yeah. So that's very similar experience.
Well, and I think another thought that comes to mind is, well, maybe this is a good topic for us both to talk about, is the word integration, because like you and I, we both resonated with it when we sort of said, all right, what should we want to take neurogenic tremoring into some new domains, breath work, body work. We want to open things up a little bit. And what did we want to call it? And we came up with neurogenic integration. But we each sort of already had a connection to that word, which I think is kind of interesting.
It is.
Like, so on my side, I had been kind of thinking in those terms, because I kind of considered my training first in the structural integration lineage, Ida Rolf's work, using that word integration, meaning in a physical level, but for, like with many mind-body therapies, the premise of Ida Rolf's work in structural integration is alignment in the field of gravity creates changes in function, and even just human flourishing. So the idea was, and she even had sort of a metaphysical framework around the field of gravity, and if if we are well aligned with that field as a predominant physical field, that opens the doors for other, being integrated as a human, which is a word that you guys use a lot. So anyway, so that was sort of from the structural integration. And then later I studied Moshe Feldenkrais's work, and he called his work functional integration. And he was friends with Ida. And so in some ways they kind of had a similar word. We want to help humans integrate. And we know we want to include the body, but we don't only mean the body, we mean how they show up in their lives, and psycho-emotional maturity, maybe even spiritual development. They were both thinking in these ways, but they had a super different way of getting there. Ida through moving the fascia around, and then Moshe Feldenkrais through a person studying voluntary movement, or receiving touch that was informing the nervous system in a particular way. Mostly around movement, but definitely not neurogenic movement. And so I studied those two, and I learned a lot about just this concept of integration. And I really believe in that idea that if we work with our body and we connect to it from a sensation perspective, we know how we are in space, how we are in gravity, how we move when we've gotten to know our, what's below our head, and incorporate that in our how we exist. To me, I very much bought into the model that this is a major pathway for growth and maturity as a human being. And so then when Tremoring entered into my life, and I spent a lot of time working with it, first with me and then with other people, I thought, okay, well, this is also integration, but in a yet a third way. Here we're working not with voluntary movement, which is what really happens with a lot of sophistication in Feldenkrais work, but through spontaneous involuntary movement, but not random and chaotic. There's something that happens when somebody tremors over time, some organizing principle or lessening of dysfunctional neuromuscular patterns, certainly oftentimes the access of tensions and traumas. And so that's what's so cool, these different layers. There's nervous system layers, there's musculoskeletal myofascial layers, and so that was sort of where my own mind was going, is that there's different, and then we could talk about integration in other things, like if you forget about the body, we could talk about psychological integration, where that's what psychotherapists would be, Jung and these people would be good at thinking about that, and I am interested in those things too. But I was really interested in embodied integration. And so then when you and I were toying around with ideas, it was like, for me, neurogenic integration, and I liked the term even more than something that has always the word tremoring in it, even though neurogenic tremoring is probably the main tool. But as we talked about, it often shifts into other kinds of spontaneous movements. In my mind, even the time that we are at rest we use that word integration. We mean at a brain level, but you've been tremoring and now you take a pause for integration. We mean it in a particular way in that context. But in my mind, it's the tremoring, it's the rest, it's the somatic awareness that emerges. All of that is what, in my view, comes into this topic or this concept of neurogenic integration. And so then when Dave put you and I in conversation, and I got to know you, and we had all this easy, we liked the term, it's almost like, I don't remember who suggested it, because okay. So, all right, but you were resonant, but you had already been starting with Jason and Marit, the integrated human platform, which is, and so to me that's such a funny connection, because it was already the frame that you were using for, after 30 years of chiropractic work, and as you and Jason and Marit bring things together in new ways, that is the direction you were pursuing. So I wonder if you could talk about your own resonance with that idea, the term integration, how it fits with how you were already conceiving it.
Well, I always say the body remembers everything, even if the brain doesn't. And it's quite interesting how we carry so many patterns. If you think of the body as a representative of the autonomic nervous system in so many ways, then what we carry in our subconscious mind is often expressed through the body. And all of this just kind of, the word integration for me is like, it's like wholeness in a way. It is becoming whole with all the different things that we experience, to kind of bring it into a connecting in a way. It's like I look at integration as putting things back together again that has been separated or segmented into pieces, both like physically and mentally and emotionally, spiritually even.
Right.
You know, and all of this is one.
Yeah.
And to be able to address the human through different access points, I find very interesting, because they just play so much together. So I guess that's where the whole thought of what I did, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that, started creating these guided meditations after tremoring.
Okay.
It just came to me so powerfully that this is a moment to enter the subconscious mind and maybe try to give the body, give the mind, give the nervous system some new ideas to work with, because we've just been through then a tremor session together in a group.
Right.
So why not utilize that silence, that peace, that quiet that you enter after a tremoring session to help integrate that into in your body and your nervous system, but also see if you can help the subconscious mind to let go of some old programs and then install some new tools.
Yep.
Or at least, I don't like the word install, because that kind of overrides, but
offer.
Exactly.
Offer,
give an opportunity to choose something different.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's all connected. You know, it's like there is so much in this.
Yeah.
And then to see how the body is working and responding and allowing the release of energy, if you want to call it that, because it's energy. You know, the heat that you were experiencing.
Yeah.
You know, it's energy.
For sure.
It's
physiological
something
energy.
that's happening there.
Definitely. Yeah.
So besides the movement, besides the tremoring, there's other things going on.
Yeah.
And seeing how the body is just doing this is so beautiful to me.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it discovers something new and does something completely different. And having the fantastic opportunity to watch people tremor over time, to see how things change, just by doing that. Because so many of the people that come to me, that we do it in groups, that's the only time they do it. And yeah, it's amazing to see.
Well, so yeah, maybe I wonder if you could share a little bit more about, because you love to work in groups, not only with tremoring, but most recently with guiding breath work and guiding meditations. And then when you're partnering with Jøssang, he's often doing work around, what he calls the top-down, inside-out sort of belief systems and mindset. So, you in the integrated human, there's this bringing together these pieces. But yeah, so and I know you love groups, and you went to Mind Valley and did big group, and you just came back from Ansbacka and did a big group there. And I've done some big groups, but you seem to thrive with it in a different way than me. I think I like the groups, but I love one-on-one. So it's just like a little bit of a difference.
I love the fact that
I know. It's great. But I would love to hear, like what things you've seen, or experiences you've had, or where you it's like when I said I had a hypothesis that if I could get my clients to tremor, maybe it would change my work and the progress, and it totally did. And it sounds like you had a hypothesis, which was, if after tremoring, if I weave in a meditation, a guided meditation, maybe people will there'll be a receptivity or new possibilities. So it sounds like that was kind of a hypothesis. And so I guess I'm curious, what did you discover in doing that? What have you learned? What's successful about that? What are you still learning?
Coming from a how can I say this? A very long meditation practice.
Right.
That I started as a 10-year-old, thanks to my parents. Meditation has always been a very integral part of my life.
Right.
And so many people tell me I can't meditate because they feel so distracted by their thoughts. That's a whole different topic that we don't have to talk about now, but since that's not really a problem, but the idea came to me because of that quietness, that silence that you enter, and I saw people they didn't want to get off the floor when we were finished. They just wanted to stay there, and many people they didn't really want to talk. They just like, can we just stay in this space? Especially the first time people tremored. So that's where that whole idea came. So why not utilize that moment? Because when people are that quiet, you would naturally think that they are in at least alpha brainwaves, maybe even deeper. So why not?
Right,
And people's experiences have been quite profound, because many said, I've never been able to meditate before, but now I feel I can. I can go there. I can go into that silence.
Yeah.
And that's very beautiful.
Yeah.
And also, of course, but that's related to the type of meditations that we do, that people discover that they can access different parts of themselves that they didn't believe in before. So that comes back to the process that Jason is doing with the process of discovering your patterns, discovering your belief systems, your emotional patterns, your behaviors, your choices, your actions that you're not necessarily happy with, and why are they going on?
Right.
And what can you do about it?
Yeah.
So then it's a great thing to use tremoring as a way to access and go really deep through the body. If people feel that their minds are chattering and they can't really enter that state as easily. But
Yeah. I love that. It reminds me, I guess I'll share a moment about, maybe 2-3 years after doing tremoring, and I was involved a lot. I was living in Wisconsin at the time, and in the meditation community, Zen community that I was participating in, a new program had developed about taking meditation basically to business leaders. This is under an organization called the Institute for Zen Leadership, just sort of it became kind of like a sister organization to the Zen Sangha that I was a part of. And I would assist in these programs. And once I learned tremoring, I said, hey, could we just sort of try this? And these were usually like typically 3 day. It was like a long weekend introduction to Zen meditation. This was sort of and then there was some curriculum around leadership challenges, that these people were facing. So it was, kind of mind body in that way. And so Ginny Whitelaw, the director, she said, sure, yeah, try whatever you want. Let's see how it works. She was very experimental. And so I started, and these are typically groups of maybe somewhere between 10 to 15, sometimes 20 people. And so I started doing at the end of each evening, leading them in a tremoring session. And it was super helpful in I was just thinking maybe this would be a kind of grounding, might loosen up their bodies a little bit, coming, because these people were, many of them new to sitting on a cushion or sitting on a stool for the physical posture of meditation. And so I didn't have like huge hopes. I just thought maybe this would be, because we'd been doing yoga, we'd been doing qigong, stuff that might just help. And so, but after a few times, like everybody, like in their evaluations and stuff would be like, oh my God, like that, total game changer, all this and that. And when I was comparing notes with Jenny, the director, and some of the other teachers, what we were learning is that at the end of our 3 days, and again, this is just beginning meditators, and that the feeling, kind of what I don't know, we might call, you get used to the feeling. When you're in a room of people meditating, as you well know from decades of time with this, you can, in a way, you feel sort of the depth of the container, right? How much distraction you feel, the energy level, how settled people are, how their breathing is, the feeling of what in nervous system language maybe we'd call it sort of co-regulation, but connectedness. You can feel that, and so at the end of a retreat, there's something has changed in the quality of being in this group of people compared to the beginning. And so what we were finding was just, wow, we were getting to a deeper place that much more quickly. And so we were like, okay, definitely we're going to keep using this, because again, kind of like with my bodywork practice, it just made it happen quicker. And at one point I started to survey people a little bit. Where at the end of a tremoring session, I would just say like what's one or two words that come to mind, just a way of, getting a quick feedback from a group. And there were basically two things that were what I heard most often. And I thought, wow, so one was people would say, it's like my thoughts just, and we're talking an hour or two, they got together, they came off of airplanes, we had a meal together, they learned what profession their neighbor is in. Yeah. We did our first meditation and learned the basics of it, and then we did a tremoring session. So right at the beginning of a weekend. And then we'd circle up afterwards. And again, one of the first comments was, wow, it's like my thinking brain just turned off. Yeah. And I'm just here. Yeah. Okay, well, that's pretty cool, because that's kind of related to one of our themes of meditation and presence and whatnot. Yeah. And then the other one that I thought was really interesting was, earlier I felt that people would make a comment, something like, I felt kind of in my own world, and now I feel, I don't know everybody here yet, but I feel connected to this group of people. And so is that word around connection, even when there's not yet been a lot of communication, but the feeling of I'm not just an individual, we're sharing something. And I thought, holy smokes, in 30, 45 minutes, and then that led me to believe that at least some of that shift, what we look for in meditation, or lots of things, what often we call presence, or whatever, it made me think a lot of that. Probably lots of people know this, and it's just me having a realization that a million people have had. But it's like, wow, there's something at the nervous system level, some shift, that when that shift happens, it shifts our mind state, and so I just was seeing that. So it just reminds me a little bit of kind of and you had different language, around sort of meditation and kind of brain state and
heart coherence, the physiological coherence.
Exactly, right.
And that is fascinating because I'm sure you've seen it too when you have a group and all of a sudden there's like this shift in the room that's a little hard to say exactly what it is. But if you then look at the bodies,
right,
there is something going on that is the same or similar.
Right.
And it's beautiful. And I'm kind of thinking, not that I know, but I'm kind of thinking that it could have something to do with several people at the same time going into physiological coherence.
Define that term for a minute, because it comes from HeartMath, right?
It comes from HeartMath.
Yeah.
Physiological coherence is basically when the systems of your body are starting to work in sync. I guess is the best way of they're working in coherence. If you look at different waves, instead of doing their own thing, they kind of start to going into sync.
Got it. Okay.
And HeartMath has done a lot of work on this in terms of the
and research too.
Right. Over 30 years of research
right.
on the magnetic field of the heart,
right.
which they say extends at least 3 feet or 1.5 meters outside your body.
Right.
I heard Joe Dispenza, I think he said 9 meters. If you are in coherence, and if you're able to strongly project emotions that is empowering, then this field expands.
Got it.
So if you are in a state of feeling safe, relaxed, in your body, present in the moment, I'm pretty sure that this field of coherence expands around you.
Right.
And HeartMath has also done research on the fact that these fields interact with each other and communicate
non-verbally.
Emotion.
Right.
The electromagnetic field does.
Right.
So there are some kind of frequency that is picked up between humans and between humans and animals. That does something. So if you have a strong coherent field yourself, you will be less receptive to other people's lack of coherence, and you will help other people go into coherence. I've done research on this. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So my thought is, without knowing for sure,
right.
Is that when this happens in a group, it has something to do with that coherence and that people are actually connecting, literally connecting.
Right.
And because what you were saying, that note, that person, that I've gotten comments from that, especially in the beginning when we were starting the groups, because people were saying, nobody knew each other.
Right.
And they would say, we meet each other downtown sometimes, you're just out shopping and they say hi and to each other, and it just says, it was described, it's just this, we know, not what,
right,
but we know. And that was so many people. There was one person who brought that up in the group. And it was like, everybody's like, yeah, exactly.
They all got it.
Know.
They knew, yeah.
And nobody explained what it is that they know, but everybody agreed on what that feeling was, because all of them could resonate with it. And I thought that was so cool.
That's really interesting.
Because that is like talking about, I don't know, building a community based on that. Of a connection that doesn't even need words, because there isn't a reason. You're just human together.
Right.
And that's just like, beautiful.
I love that. Well, I feel like, that's we did some work this week on the art and the philosophy. And I feel like this, like what you're speaking to, maybe we a little bit covered in our brainstorming, but it's making me realize that this can be an even stronger part of our philosophy, I believe, because we talked about integration, sort of top down, in and out,
Inside out,
one aspect of integration, both mechanically, but then how we interact with the world around us. But I'm really resonating with this exact theme, the theme of mind-body coherence and connectedness. And I too, I've been so impressed by HeartMath giving a framework that connects the science a little bit.
Oh, big time.
Into, because everybody knows intuitively, well, maybe not everybody, but I think most people know intuitively that we influence one another. Somebody walks in the room who's anxious.
You feel it.
You feel it, right? And some people are more sensitive than others, and certainly as we interact with animals, even nature, or how some people describe how it is that they connect whatever somebody's, sort of spiritual orientation, whether that's connecting to a higher power or connecting to, wholeness, or
something bigger than yourself.
Something bigger than yourself, exactly. It could be defined different ways. Most people describe that as a feeling state, not a thinking state, but a feeling state. And so that may be something that we continue to uncover a little bit, or put words around, because I think that's something you and I have in common about something we believe about tremoring, is that yes, we're interested in the tremors you could see and are rippling through the body. And I think you and I both believe that it's influencing how we vibrate, even when we've stopped a tremor session, and that there's some layers of our vibration are not necessarily visible in the same way, yet they are part of how we resonate with the world around us and with each other. So that, even in our logo, our logo is sort of all those complexity of frequencies coming together. And so that's another thing where I think you and I think have a pretty shared philosophy in a way of vibration, right? So I think that's another thing that we'll do more of. Yeah.
Seeing how energy also moves through the body.
Yeah.
However to explain that. But if you look at Eastern philosophy and Kundalini, you could compare it to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because some people get a very, very strong sensation of that energy moving up.
Yeah, or Shakti. It doesn't.
Shakti.
Yeah, so there's all the Eastern traditions. But then to me, it's like I started in the Eastern traditions, and I love the language of Shakti and Chi and Ki, and
exactly.
To me, I have a lot of resonance with that. And then, but I've been so happy to see Western, HeartMath being one of them. They're looking at energy and they're looking at from an electromagnetic perspective, or the grandfather of Tremoring in some ways is Wilhelm Reich in bioenergetics, and then Alexander Lowen, his predecessor, who was a bit major influence on David Berceli. So so Wilhelm Reich introduced the concept of body armoring, but then also, I think he called it orgone, was the name for body energy or vitality. So another model of looking at including energy.
Because David also he uses the term, I love it, coming to life.
Coming to life, waking up.
And I love that. You see a part of the body coming to life.
Right. Well, it's like seeing. I love those. I always like those. I love the analogies to the natural world, like animals. It's a big part. But even plants. It's like a plant that hasn't had enough light or not enough water, and then it receives that nourishment. And then the way that a plant can start, can come to life in that way, and we can sense that when something is more vital biologically, and I think that's a part of, for sure, what tremoring is about. How do we can sense and we can see that. But then I also really like some of the trauma models that Peter Levine and Robert Scare and others have brought in around discharge.
Absolutely.
Because it gives when you said earlier, I had a big tremoring and then there was the heat. Okay, well, we can definitely see, so we could talk about energy in an abstract way, and we could talk about it in a very physiological way, as heat is certainly energy in that. But then Peter Levine and others have given us a model of how our tissues and our brain work together to literally retain impulses of what Peter Levine calls incomplete motor responses, or sometimes incomplete emotional responses, and the idea that under certain conditions, when we have mobilized or created the impulse towards a high energy event, whether that's a fight or flight response, or the impulse to shout, or creating a strong freeze response, which is all very physiological in nature, if those strong processes haven't come into completion at the time, or we didn't tremor afterwards, or we didn't say what was on our chest or get it off, then there's a very literal way that our nervous system still retains the potential energy connected to those biological processes. And so a term that we bring into tremoring is the concept of discharge, or the related term would be completion. To if you initiated a stress response or an emotional process at the biological level, if it hasn't completed on its own, which is what we would hope would happen, what are the conditions that will let it just discharge or complete? And one that feels good, because you're no longer carrying the charge unconsciously of whether it's stress, fear, grief, pain, whatever. So it sort of feels good psycho-emotionally to process and let go. We feel lighter often. But also just physiologically, we free up our energy system.
Yes.
Because it's not stuck doing it.
You're not spending your energy pushing it down.
Maintaining that state or pushing that state down.
Keeping it in this place,
right.
Because
segmented.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's painful to feel it, or it's painful to. It's painful to feel.
So like that's what I'm so excited about, is that we have language we can pull in from so many, trauma and stress physiology models, older traditions, Western things that talk about body energy, Eastern modalities, Kundalini and Shakti, and other ones that give really nice frameworks. And I think a lot of people in the world today are interested in that intersection, what you call the art, philosophy, and science. The science part is kind of we're in a pretty scientific era of our world, so we kind of want to know what are the mechanics of it, and then the art of it is how to become sensitive to the practice, use it in artful ways, ways that are deepening. I mean, that's the topic of the second course, is around deepening one's practice. And of course, if you're facilitating, skill and art and sensitivity and intuition, that's all in the artfulness. But then in the philosophy, it's a bit like the why or the meaning. How does this fit into, why do this?
How does it fit into humanness? How does it fit into society? How it fits into groups? How it fits in with the globe in many ways.
What impact could this have? Or I like that. How does this fit in with the globe? How could this be useful to address modern experiences of stress, modern experiences of disconnection, modern experiences of disintegration at the bodily level, because of we don't move in the same ways as we evolved biologically. So it's like, how does this method address the contemporary humanity? To me, a lot of ways.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
So what is neurogenic tremoring?
Well, so what I was going to ask you is, like, when you're describing it to somebody who doesn't know what it is, how do you describe it? What neurogenic tremoring is?
It always kind of depends on the person and where we are in the conversation. I usually explain what it does for you before I explain what it is.
Yeah.
And why it's a good thing, or why it's a good idea for that person to do it. And being a practicing chiropractor, I would then generally talk about specifically the tension in the psoas, or the hip flexor, because a lot of people carry a lot of tension and pain there that causes the hip pain and back pain and pelvic pain. And
for you as a chiropractor, what are the telltale signs that somebody is their psoas is carrying a lot of tension?
Well, it could be direct pain in the area,
Yep.
or in the supporting structures around.
Yep.
Or it could be, I often find a lack of motion in the upper lumbars, L2, specifically L2, most often. Sometimes 1 or 3 also, depending on. But very often, if I palpate there, I will ask, and I find, oh, here it's restricted. I will ask the patient or the person, do you have any pain in your groin? And very often they'll say yes. Or that they feel it's heavy to kind of take a step up and walk uphill, in and out of the car, you know, any kind of motion in the hip joint.
Yeah.
So, or if it is a really difficult case, if I'm thinking when I start, oh, this should be fairly easy. It looks very straightforward, and then it turns out not to be. Then very often the hip flexor is involved, the psoas is involved.
Yeah.
And then, especially then, it becomes much more interesting to people because they wanna get well.
Yeah.
You know. So what can we do? And people generally go to the classic thing: can I train more? Can I stretch more?
Yeah, strengthen.
And
yeah.
And very often both of those things is not necessarily a good idea when it's already either not at all active or it is totally tight. And why would you want to pressure it even more with exercise, you know?
Right.
So, and if it's not active, then you just build the compensation rather than fix the problem. So,
right.
To activate it in some way. And tremoring is wonderful for that. That's
so if somebody believes you, they learn that their psoas is tight or underactive or there's something, and then how do you describe? So you say this tremoring somehow.
Yeah, I actually describe it as I describe tremoring as shaking or a quiver or a vibration in the muscle.
Yeah.
And I compare it to putting on, you know, those massage apparatuses, I don't know what you call it in English, that vibrate, that you put on.
Yeah.
And I said it's like that, but without the
device.
helper. Without the device. Yeah, it just vibrates from the inside.
Yep.
And most people, of course, think that this is a little strange. And it is. Let's just face it, it is.
Yeah.
It is a really odd and absolutely wonderful feeling.
Right.
But most of the time, it just feels odd right in the beginning.
Yep.
And then people go into a state of awe.
Yeah.
And I love that because in the beginning, when the tremor is starting, they're like, am I doing this? Or am I not doing this? And, you know, Marit that we worked with, she has this wonderful way of describing it. And I love it because it's so simple. She said, if you try to do it. When you come home, try to do it voluntarily.
Right.
You won't last more than a minute or two. You'll be exhausted. You cannot do it by will. Right. And you know how hard she trains.
Absolutely.
She tried. Of course she did.
Right.
And she said,
couldn't do it. Couldn't
ain't
do
happening.
More than a minute or two.
Yeah. Then she was just finished.
Yeah.
You cannot.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just so.
Yeah, I've never heard that, but that is such a good.
It's great.
Way to answer that question.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like right on. You can.
Funny. Well, so you were saying that. Okay, so, so tight hip flexors, tight psoas, or underactive psoas. That's one.
It's a very quick entrance into talking about it for people who are in pain that come to
you
help. Yeah. For help. Yeah.
And then you were saying that like another common thing is like stress.
Stress. Absolutely. Because we did absolutely notice an increase in stress in general in the population. The conversation in the clinic changed. It was very interesting to, oh, my back hurts because I shoveled snow or I changed the tires or I've been working on the farm or I slipped on the ice, whatever the reason was. Before it was always very physical.
Mechanical.
Very mechanical and very understandable. This happened. this was the result.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hurting.
Mhm.
You know, I know I did too much or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's more like, I don't feel that I can do enough for my kid, or I don't have enough time to do all the stuff that I want.
Yeah.
I feel stretched all the time. I feel behind all the time.
Yeah.
I can't relax. My sleep is worse. All of those telltale signs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people seem to be more aware and open, or more stressed out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that was a very good way to enter. I mean, people who are here, and you can see they're breathing in the upper part of their chest. They can't get the breath down at all. If you ask them to, they do this, you know, and that's the deep breath. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then they can feel it themselves too, that, oh, yeah, it's my
Something's
body
stuck.
is, yeah, I can't get my body to chill.
Yeah.
And then often I talk about
I
it
see. That's your
as a
other
way
point.
to get the muscles to relax, get the nervous system to tone itself down, change phases.
Yeah.
Mm.
Nice.
So that's my two entrance point in it, to explain to people why they would want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
to explain what it is. I think I often just refer to David about explaining why we tense up when we're stressed out, or when we're hurting, or when there's a, you know, we go into defense to protect ourselves.
Protective response, yeah.
And that is very automatic.
Right.
And I often refer to the fetal position. You know,
Fetal.
we go into that position so naturally. And that a postural change of rolling your shoulder forward, making your head come forward, is like a miniature version of that.
Right.
And then I talk about that there's actually also a natural way to come out of that, to kind of open back up again and get your body to relax and breathe again. Yeah. And that tremoring is that.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people kind of go, oh, wow, really? They find it interesting.
Yeah.
And enticing enough to want to try it.
Yeah.
And then they go into, many people say, I did, especially the ones that said, come on, you really got to try this, you know. And then they go, I was afraid because I thought that I couldn't do it.
Right.
I have not yet met a person who cannot do it.
Right.
You know, because it's not something that you
don't have to learn. It's not a skill.
It's there.
It's a thing. You know? Yeah. Yep.
So I like to call it a force of nature because it's built into your body. Instead of, you can call it Shakti if you want to, but I love calling it a force of nature, and people can tune into that because they feel it's going by itself. You know.
Cool. Love that. Let's talk a little bit about.
But hey, you can.
Okay.
You
then you have to interview me.
So you don't have to.
Okay. All right. Okay.
What's your?
Lay it on me. What's the question?
What's the question? So if you were to explain tremoring to someone, what would it be?
Yeah, like you, I think it's a little bit dependent. But I would often start with, I would compare it to something they might relate to. I might say, have you ever felt fidgety when you're nervous, or even trembly, giving a talk, or there's a conversation you're nervous about, or sometimes like, something really surprising has happened, an accident or something, or surgery, those kinds of common examples, dogs tremoring. So I often will sort of ask to see if people, usually they have some, reference. Or shivering when you're cold. It's not exactly the same, but it's,
the sensation can be similar.
It's a connection of your body tremoring. So I often will ask about that, and then I'll say, well, what's interesting is that it turns out that we have a reflex to tremor under stress, and it's really common post-surgery, accidents, fear, nervousness.
After birth.
After birth, excitement. These are all really, but though what's unique about that is that those are always, in a way, surprises, or they happen organically. And so, I mean, on the one hand, I think it's interesting that we organically tremor. And David's key insight was that wasn't just some random thing we do, but as you just shared, there must be a reason for that. And as other biologists, there's a woman, Dutch biologist, who I refer to a lot when I teach about tremoring, if I'm lecturing about it, because she did it, von Muggenthaler or something. I'll have to look up her name. But what she kind of gave this really nice summary, and she said, if for wild animals to tremor at a time of high vulnerability, like after being attacked or something like that, for that behavior to have, that's happening at a time when of vulnerability in general, and where energy conservation would be important. And so if that behavior has survived evolutionarily, then there from an evolutionary biology perspective, there must be a survival benefit to that behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't just be, because I think what I would have said before I was educated is, oh, that's just like a side effect. Like, oh, you're tremoring because your nerves are shot. I mean, I don't even know
Some people call it like an adrenaline.
There's
jump.
adrenaline. It's
Yeah.
just, and then, but then as soon as you explain it away like that, it's like there's not much curiosity anymore.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like you've gotten used to it. Oh, that's a weird thing that we do.
Yeah.
So to me, what I think is so interesting about David is that he was like, no, why exactly is that happening? And just as you said, if we have an instinct for protection under threat or even stress, or, as you say, the mini posture of overwhelm and things like that, then maybe there's a mechanism that goes the other direction. And you could say, well, maybe you just relax. Sure. But what's interesting about tremoring is it's more than just you've tightened and you've relaxed. It's more active than just relaxing, that sort of restorative aspect of tremoring. But, so anyway, so I'll oftentimes kind of make that connection. And then what I often say is, to me, what's so interesting about neurogenic tremoring as a practice, like in NIT, is, unlike those organic life situations that just happen and then you respond physiologically, it turns out that in the context of relaxation, with intention, the intention of finding neurogenic tremoring, we don't have to wait to a loud noise or you're getting nervous before giving a talk. We can actually intentionally activate this response and then allow it, work with it, and even cultivate it and become very, and as we did with Mara this morning, exploring all kinds of different ways, what you and I have been calling self-facilitation. What are the things that might deepen this? And so it's something that we can bring on, not in us, even though it evolved under stress, we can bring it back under not stress, more or less. And it might touch upon old stresses. That might be why we carry protective patterns. But we don't need new stress in order to bring it on.
Exactly.
We just need the intention and the relaxation. And then we now have created an environment where we can get back in touch with our sort of basic biology. And once we sort of say yes to the phenomenon, we can see where that takes us. And that could be muscular release. It could be, we don't know, we wouldn't be able to describe it, but something's different. It could be connecting to some memory that you didn't even seem that important. For myself, I have lots of examples of little things like that. Like, I think in one of my earliest times tremored for a while. And then I came out of it and I thought, wow, that's so strange. I have a strong taste of, salt water, seawater. But that's strange. Did my sinuses drain? What? And then I thought, you know what? It's not just like sinuses. Like, this is the exact taste of the ocean in Hawaii, where I spent a lot of time growing up. And then I didn't think that much about it, but I think I was in a seminar, and then half an hour later, I think we were trading partners and somebody was guiding me, and so I was doing it again. And then a whole memory and connection came back, a time that I had been body surfing and a big set of waves came in and held me under, and quite scary. But and this was maybe when I was 10 or 11 years old, and I was fine. And I didn't really think of this as been, a major life event other than, oh crap, that was frightening. But when I remembered it, when I was tremoring, it wasn't like I went into some fear state. It was just these images came back. I remembered it. I remembered what the day was like. And this was what this taste of seawater in my mouth. And so, in trauma work, not only within our work in TRE, but in somatic experiencing and in other ones, and Bob Scare and Peter Levine talk about a procedural memory or implicit memory. And it's this idea that our explicit memory is what we've recorded, the sort of the story, and that your hippocampus does the recording of our explicit memory. But as you said earlier, our body remembers everything at different level. And so implicit or perceived.
Give me your heart.
Your heart.
Literal memory.
Okay.
Long and short-term
memory.
Well,
I need to read more about that.
There's
neurons.
There is the heart brain.
I see.
It
has a memory as well.
Memory, long and short-term memory.
Okay, super cool. All right,
wild.
well, that's my next area of study. But anyway, so this idea of procedural memories are that under the right conditions, your body can remember more sensory things, either imagery or, in my case, that smell. Or I've even seen times where it's common where somebody's injury, the sensation of it might reemerge, like they broke an ankle, and it's basically fine, but now the pain pattern comes back for a bit. I've even seen times where physical marks, like a bruise that was present, might reemerge for a somatization. Yep.
That's amazing.
Bob Scare writes a lot about that. He was the one who really sort of researched how the body memory or the procedural memory can bring these elements forward. And the way Bob Scare describes it is that when we in conditions of safety, but we allow this neural processing to happen, as long as in our present moment we have safety, then we are, he uses the word extinguishing or neutralizing. So we're basically clearing out what were originally threat responses, but now because we're recontextualizing it, we're sending signals to our limbic system, our amygdala, that, hey, this is totally safe and I'm good. And then that is sort of the model for processing trauma at that level. So I don't usually talk about all that stuff, but I just kind of got on that roll. But in terms of other, that example, I'm trying to think some other interesting ones from my own experience. Well, you know what's interesting? One of my most dramatic, this is after I was doing tremoring, but one of the times that was the most organic tremoring I've ever had is that I was near my home. I was near somebody when somebody almost got shot. And so I heard gunfire and I thought it was fireworks. But then I realized it was somebody shooting at somebody else. And then they missed and that person was okay and the would-be shooter ran away. And I was right near my home. So I, closed my car door. I was getting out of my car at the time and I went up into my home and then I was the one who called the police, and then I had a little bit of identifying information for the person. So I did all of that, and everything was fine. And as soon as I hung up with the call on the police, all of my body just shaking and trembling. And by then I knew about it. Yeah. And so I called people, I processed verbally, I talked to my mom and dad and friends and explained all of it. And my body, it was maybe an hour or two. And then of course I knew about it. So of course I'm just going to let my body go through this process. So sometimes I'll talk about, I'll look to see if they have a personal example, because then I might be able to. But again, I really like to emphasize this idea that when we're doing it on purpose, we're approaching it through safety, relaxation. We can still get into it, but part of the magic of it is what happens now that we're in a context of safety. Because then things can sort of complete that didn't get
And then
completed.
when you know about it, and it happens organically,
you're
not afraid of it. You can just allow it to happen.
Right.
I remember once I had a patient who drove off the road. It was winter. She was on her way to an appointment
Yep.
with me.
Yep.
And she came, of course, late, dressed out, and apologized.
Don't apologize. Yeah.
But she told me I was holding my phone. So she slid off the road. It was icy.
Yeah.
And she slid into a field.
Okay.
So it was okay. Her car just did
Spun around.
Yeah.
Mm.
But of course, it's frightening, right?
Yeah.
So she stepped out of the car and was calling for assistance. And she said her hand was shaking so much that she couldn't hit the numbers on her phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say, that is fantastic. And she looked at me and said, are you crazy?
You would say, yeah.
You know,
you've lost.
and I just said, no, listen. So I explained it to her,
Yeah.
what was going on, that it was just her body reacting to the shock of losing control, right?
Right.
So that if you can find that when you come home now from treatment,
Right.
just lay down on your bed, on the couch, wherever you're comfortable,
Right.
and see if you can find it, or bend your knees and do, you know,
Right.
if you can find that feeling in your body that you had,
Right.
and just allow it.
Yeah.
And I told her how to stop it and how to, so she could feel in control.
Yeah. Self-regulate.
And she actually did it. And it was great because she said, so wonderful. It felt like she could just release it, and she let it come and go in like waves.
Yeah.
It was coming and going. And she had this is an area where you can drive fairly fast. So she got tossed around. I mean, she was stiff and sore and stuff after feeling a little beat up. Yeah. But she had no whiplash, nothing after it.
Wow.
I love that.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
It is.
Yeah.
So.
Super cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's.
And I notice it myself too.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
If I am in a conversation about something that really engages me, it doesn't have to be anything traumatic. It's just that I'm really engaged.
Energized. Yeah.
I can feel that tiny little tremor going.
Okay. I love that. One of my favorite videos, I'm sure you've seen this YouTube video. Have you seen the one where the daughter has gone hunting with her father? And she's quite young, maybe, I don't know, 10 or 12 perhaps. And they've harvested a deer, and then
she actually shot it.
Oh, she did? I think you're right.
I think so.
You're right. I think she
landed.
She shot the deer, and then her father was there, and then I think he's the one recording, and she's just trimming it, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on? Are you cold?" "No, I'm not cold." And then he tries telling her about something else, and she's.
But he was totally cool though.
Right, exactly.
And it was so nice. He just allowed it to happen. He was just curious, but then he didn't try to stop it, or didn't freak out at all. He was just.
Right.
It was gorgeous.
Yeah. A perfect example of that excitement energy. And coming out of that tremoring. Well, I think it would be interesting. Why don't we, let's talk a little bit about our vision for the website, Neurogenic Integration, and the different things that we're imagining, kind of in a way, the focus and the mission of this project. Maybe we both can just share why we are, both of us have background in TRE, but we've come together under a little bit of a new name, Neurogenic Integration, to take some different elements together, bring this education into some new domains that it hasn't gone in. Let's talk about that. That's sort of where we're going with that. Well, let's start with you, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, we can also mention it was David that brought us together.
Right.
He contacted you guys, or you and me, and had us meet up because he thought we were thinking similarly, and apparently we are. We're Gladys.
He didn't know my ancestors were from Boston. No, I didn't know that.
I knew that.
Yeah, no.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
But him knowing how we were feeling about trying to get this more known to people in various, call them health professions, or professions where you help other people.
Right.
to try to expand the understanding and recognition of this, and also the value in teaching it, and having more people find it.
Yeah, learn about it
in themselves and use it.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess our vision is to spread this to organizations, to
professions, groups, communities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that is yeah,
through an online platform.
Through an online platform, exactly. So that's the way that I was sort of thinking about it as well. Is it's 2024, and post-pandemic, so much has quite successfully, the field of online education was already happening a lot pre-pandemic, but suddenly everything has there's such an
escalation in the
major
technology.
Escalation in that direction. So, and I've been teaching TRE that way, and that's gone well as lots of TRE providers. But part of our vision and thought was, well, we now have it's now normal to create online education courses, video-based courses, and we can go into any topic we can think of, and we don't necessarily have to organize a live seminar. You don't have to come to Colorado where I live, and I don't always have to come to Norway and work with massage therapists in the U.S. or chiropractors in Norway, or personal trainers or nurses or whomever, that we might get the best bang for our buck if we create those specialized content through video learning, but then always with the opportunity to, we can still, of course, do live trainings. We can work with particular groups. People can work one-on-one with us, but at least a lot of the detailed information and things that are specific, like in my case, the story I was telling earlier about as a body worker, and I thought every body worker would want to learn that.
Exactly.
And even if all it is to know what it is, what they're already seeing sometimes, and maybe even more so to facilitate it or to give somebody a tool that helps everything you're doing. So my insight was all body workers, but then, now I've been in the training and being as, more than 10 years. And so I just keep seeing new areas. I have students of mine who have been personal trainers, and now that's a major part of the way they work. Nurses who they do it in-house as part of stress management in the hospital setting, or during COVID, doctors and nurses. We did some training with people. Most recently, we've been training firefighters at the New York Fire Department, because recognizing that Tremoring would be good there. And so
there's so many.
Or midwives, or the inspiration we've talked about this week from Veronique.
Geriatric.
Yeah, geriatric elder care.
Yeah.
Assisted living. Yeah. People who are at any stage of aging, but especially that first transition when they're recognizing, okay, I need to start thinking about my health and well-being as I hit 60, 65, 70. It's a huge possibility. That's a population that would do wonderfully if they knew about it. And the conversation between you, me, and David is, not everybody is going to find their way organically to TRE. I mean, TRE has existed as a name, as a modality for, somewhere between about 15, 20 years, depending on what part of the world you're in. And TRE has been very successful in a grassroots kind of a way. And it's known in certain pockets geographically, and it's done amazing work. But what we haven't done a lot with is the willingness to go out to groups and say, okay, well, we're gonna like we just did with the New York Fire Department. All right, what do you know? They know a lot. They knew way more about the nervous system than I expected that they would.
Exactly.
And then, okay, so now what about the tremor response? Probably they don't know too much about it. And so I think that's where we're going with our neurogenic integration platform. One of our things is that specialization, creating useful material for communities that the first thing they might just want to know more about it. Later, they might want to start to work with it. Okay, what do they need to do? thirdly, they might want to get some more in-depth
Mm-hmm.
education about it, just depending on how much education that they need. And then, of course, we've also talked about, because of web-based learning, you're creating community where we can have learning environments where people who, not even necessarily professional, not that they have a profession, but they're using it for themselves.
They can share.
They can go through that deepening process. They can be in community with others, ask questions. So that's sort of another whole thread. But yeah, what else are we?
Tremor together across the globe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Online.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. What else? Yeah. What else in terms of where we might go? I mean, we've talked about creating some live seminars. We've talked about doing some attending, spreading the word through events, and as you've already been doing with Mind Valley, and I guess, and we are, a good example of a partnership is what we're working on with Soma Breath.
Yes.
Soma Breath being a well-known
breathwork modality,
international exposure, and they're, through your connections with, as a Soma Breath practitioner, and then with the founder, Neuraj, who knew Tremoring from a bit of his own personal journey, and the conversation that has come up with him is, all right, wouldn't your breath workers love to know more about Tremoring? Maybe there's times when they can introduce Tremoring within the context of, and so that's what we're doing. We're building out a course.
And for them to understand trauma and trauma reactions, because that can come up in breathwork also.
Exactly. So taking some of our knowledge.
There is lots of sharing opportunities.
Exactly. And so I think part of what I'm imagining is that we can have, there are so many different kinds of, not only professions, but even training communities where they're already educating people. And if we could empower them to speak intelligently about the neurogenic tremor reflex, and with some things, practical things to do, then to me, that's going to be another really big way to spread things. Yeah. Maybe we'll do retreats. You're already doing retreats through Integrated Human.
That's happening in October already.
In Munich?
Yeah.
How's that? Tell us about that. How is the Tremoring going to support the program?
Integrated Human there.
What's the name of that program? Is called Tremor Flow, right?
Tremor to Flow.
Tremor to Flow, yeah.
And I like it because, it puts your body in flow.
Literally.
Literally.
Yeah.
So Jason and I are going to do it together. He's going to do his Magic with the Mind.
Yeah.
And help people to find old patterns that they might want to let go of. And then we're going to I want to teach tremor, and we're going to use the tremoring together with that mindset and work the patterns out of both
mind, body, top down,
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. First time we're doing a direct connection.
Cool.
Yeah.
Will you do some Soma breath as well?
No. Breath work, yes, but not the classic Soma breath session. It's going to be too much. It's one day.
Yep.
It's intense already, so we don't need to back it even further.
Yeah.
But of course, we're hoping for longer. Like when we had the flow state weekend, we use Soma breath. We would love to introduce tremoring into that, but then we need a few more days because it's a lot for people to handle. We can't pack everything into this.
So Steve, you were talking about, I had asked about some of your own experience connecting neurogenic tremoring to meditation, and you shared how, thanks to your parents, you got started with meditation at age 10, something like that. And we're sitting here, and you've got this amazing quote from your father.
Yeah.
That it's kind of talking about some of these same things. I wonder if you would read it both in Norwegian, but then give us a translation. I was really touched by it.
Oh, maybe ChatGPT translated it better than I can. I never saw that translation.
Right.
But in Norwegian, it says, Uventa en gang faller jeg i sprekken mellom to tanker der ordet ennå er uformet og lagnad flytende. Forvandling. Brått. Noen sekunder står medvite krystallklart, lysende. Men hvordan kan forstanden forklare at sekundet var tomt for tid og rommet uten storleik?
Will you give us your translation?
All right. Let's see how I can do this. Unexpected ones. I fell in the crack between two thoughts where words are still unformed and destiny is still in floating, forvandling, what is that? Floating transformation. Suddenly, a few seconds, consciousness is crystallized, a light. But how can your mind explain that the second was empty of time and space without size?
It's a beautiful piece.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.